Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. Just 15 months after re-election, is the government drifting and has it lost direction, or is that an unfair perception? That's the key issue I shall tackle today with the Minister for Human Resource Development, Kapil Sibal. Kapil Sibal, whether it's Kashmir or tackling the Maoists, whether it's rising prices or preparation for the Commonwealth Games, or even relations with Pakistan, people perceive confusion or paralysis. What's gone wrong?
Well, I don't think that's quite true. Of course, these are issues. All that you mentioned are real issues. And I think any government would be facing these issues, whoever was in power at this point in time. So we are facing those issues. We're trying to resolve some legacy issues, because many of these are legacy issues. The price rise issue, as you know, is an issue that the government is exceptionally concerned about. And debates have taken place in Parliament and the Finance Minister has addressed them. So I don't think you can put the blame on the doorstep of the government.
Let's look at one or two of the issues where the sense of drift is perhaps most apparent to try and get some sense of where the government stands. To begin with, the Maoists. The Prime Minister has repeatedly said that they are the single biggest security threat that India faces. Yet Mamata Banerjee, your colleague, hosts a rally with the support of the Maoists, and the IG of the Western Range of West Bengal has confirmed that Asit Mahato, who's wanted in connection with the Janeshwari Express attack, was present at the rally. How do you explain this contradiction?
Well, first of all, if you want to talk about the general issue of Maoists, that's one thing. If you want to talk about a particular rally, that's quite another thing. Because you cannot talk about a particular rally and talk then of the government in general on that. So if you want to talk about the Maoist issue, I'm ready to talk about it.
I'll tell you why I bring up the rally. Because for many people, that rally and the speech that she made have been interpreted as undermining the government's strategy.
That's all right. I mean, as I said, there'll be many speeches in the history of this country and many in the last 10, 15 years, which in a given situation would seek to undermine the authority of the government. But that's not so.
Would you accept that this has undermined the authority?
I don't think so at all. I don't think it is undermined the authority. The Home Minister has made it quite clear that many of these people are perceived as Maoists by the Home Ministry, and certainly the government concerned is entitled to take action. And the Home Minister said in Parliament that he'd be ready and willing to deal with them.
Except that when members of the cabinet don't speak in one voice but appear to contradict each other, not just over small things like who attends the rally.
If you want to look at the government in its overall performance, let's look at it. If you don't talk about individuals here and there saying something or the other, I don't think that undermines the enormous success of the government, especially in the context of the economy. I think that's really
I'll come to the economy now. Just to stick to this, you therefore don't agree with the public perception that Mamata Banerjee's rally and speech have undermined or compromised the government's policy on Maoists?
I mean, whether Mamata encouraged them, did not encourage them, I don't know. I mean, this is not something that I have any knowledge about.
But you're not embarrassed by the speech?
I'm certainly not embarrassed by the speech. If Mamata has made a speech, and if that particular speech, people are unhappy about it, well, people are free to criticize. I don't think the government of India is undermined by that process. So in a sense, and I think that's an extreme conclusion.
So in a sense, you see what Mamata said and did as something that's separate from the government's policy.
No. Government clearly is wanting to deal with the Maoists. And wherever we find that individuals are perceived to be a Maoist by the government of India will certainly brook no interference in that process.
So when the people of India turn around and say that they are confused by Mamata's speech and where the government stands?
I don't think the people of India are confused. People of India understand the politics.
All right, let's come to another issue where the sense of drift seems to be strong, Kashmir. Since June the 11th, the state has been in turmoil, yet the government in Delhi appears paralyzed, and until Tuesday, the Prime Minister was completely silent. Is that the wisest way of responding to what many believe is perhaps the most serious crisis affecting the valley?
Karan, please do not look at the performance of the government by looking at one issue and one statement made on a particular day. Remember, Kashmir is a legacy issue. Kashmir has been in turmoil for a long period of time. The turmoil in Kashmir or the Maoist situation has not arisen since the coming up of the UPA government. So therefore, these are legacy issues and have to be dealt with in that context.
I accept the point that they're legacy issues, but hasn't the Kashmir issue, in a sense, been inflamed and become much worse in the last 6 weeks when the government's silence
Let me put it this
way.
Maybe the tactics of those outsides have changed. Maybe things, it's an ever-evolving situation. But let me say one thing on record. And I think the Prime Minister said it. The Prime Minister understands the hurt of the people of Kashmir. He said so. The Prime Minister wants to reach out to the people of Kashmir. I think nobody in this government, nobody in this nation does not grieve with young children, with young children and their families who are victims.
Except
right?
that in this instance, the Prime Minister should have spoken much earlier. His silence has exacerbated the alienation.
You cannot talk about governments by saying Prime Minister should have spoken earlier or later. That's the perception that the media might have. But I think the government knows when it should speak, and the Prime Minister knows when
Once again, on this question of perception, it's much like the Maoist issue I talked to you about. You don't worry and you aren't concerned that the perception of the press and many people is that the government doesn't have a policy or a position on Kashmir.
As I said, Karan, the press is not running our government, though it seeks to set the agenda. And I think the press also, in some instances, should not go overboard. I have great respect for the press, but I am finding instances, especially...
You're worried about press criticism?
I'm not worried at all. In fact, I welcome press criticism. But the press must also understand the context in which things are done. Perhaps they don't know, they have not access to facts that the government has access to.
But then shouldn't the government share those facts to the country?
Some facts can be shared, some facts cannot be shared.
Kashmir is one area where things can't be shared.
We know, we do share some facts, and in fact, most of the time we do share facts. And now with the Right to Information Act, most facts are available to the public at large.
You're asking for a more understanding press. Let me then test that by coming to a third subject, the Commonwealth Games. Despite the delays, despite the proliferating allegations of corruption and the dismal state of Delhi's roads and pavements, your colleague Jayapal Reddy keeps saying these are going to be the best ever Commonwealth Games. To people, when they hear that, they say such bravado proves that he's either in a state of denial or he's blind to the actual problems.
Okay, now Karan, may I request you that when are the games going to be held? October?
The 3rd.
The 3rd,
Just
right?
6 weeks away.
Just 6 weeks away. Will you not please wait for 6 weeks to pass judgment?
Okay, that's a fair point.
My request is wait for 6 weeks. But I can tell you one thing on record today, that perhaps the stadiums that you will see perhaps are better than any stadium anywhere in the world.
Let me accept what you said, wait 6 weeks to judge, but let me counter that by putting this to you. Your government has been preparing for these games from 2004. If with just 6 weeks left, things still seem shambolic, doesn't that suggest that the government hasn't performed?
I'm not disputing that there are certain issues that may perhaps have been addressed earlier. I'm not disputing that. There are certain issues that should be looked at. There are allegations that have been made. Whether they are true or not, I cannot say, but certainly all those must be looked into.
And will be?
I'm sure will be, because the appropriate authorities will certainly decide, and they have to, because under the Right to Information Act, now you can get all the data. But the point is, we are 6 weeks away from the games. Let's not denigrate India. Let's not destroy India's credibility in the global community.
All of us are one with you when you say that.
And please, therefore, don't go overboard. Let the games take place. On the 3rd of October, they will start, and they'll be over by the 16th of October.
Let me put a question to you, not as a cabinet minister, this time as an MP for Delhi. As you know, perhaps better than me, this city is in a state of apprehension about what could happen when the games come. Do you share your voters and your constituents' concern?
Of course I share. When I go to Connaught Place, I see part of that still in a state of total disarray.
So you too are worried?
I am worried, but they tell me that by August 31, all this will be over.
All right.
And I cannot not believe them.
Let's then try and tie this up by putting to you the central concern why people are worried about this government drifting, losing direction, and not being in control. And that's to do with the lackluster nature of leadership. Let me put it like this. Sharad Pawar seems to be more interested in cricket than his ministry. Chidambaram is being publicly checked by Digvijay Singh and Manish Shankar Iyer. Monteg Ahluwalia and Kamal Nath don't agree on roads. Jairam Ramesh reputedly doesn't seem to agree with any of his colleagues. And Mamta is more absent than present. What's going on?
Well, I don't know. I don't know, whether what you're stating impacts the overall performance of the government, I personally am not willing to comment on any of these things because I don't think it is my station to comment.
It may not affect performance, but image.
But see, there are lots of positive things that are also happening in the government that have never happened in the history of this country. So people weigh the pros and cons. Not every government is perfect, right? And people ultimately weigh the overall performance of the government, how it's done in the economy, how it's done in some crucial sectors. And I do believe that this government has, in fact, put in places systems that have never been put in place in this country before.
One last question before I take a break and come to what I know you want to discuss, the positives. People are perplexed by the strange behavior of the Prime Minister. They say, whilst the government appears to lurch from crisis to crisis, he's either silent or invisible. It's almost as if he's opted out.
I mean, first of all, I do not think that Prime Ministers should speak every day. Right? I think the Prime Minister
but what
is
about
wise.
When there's a
the
perceived
Prime Minister
sense of
ultimately
crisis?
leads the country. Yes, there was a sense of crisis and the Prime Minister has spoken.
Which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about Kashmir.
But he took 7 or 8 weeks.
It doesn't matter because we were letting the state government deal with the situation. Remember,
on the Commonwealth Games, he's silent.
Remember this. Many
on
of
Mamta,
these,
he's silent.
Remember this. Much of what happens in Kashmir happens because of certain very complex factors which need not necessarily be attributed within the territory of Kashmir itself.
So you're saying he speaks when he needs to speak?
He speaks when he needs to speak, and he rightly spoken, and he's spoken time.
You don't agree that his silence on the Commonwealth Games or on Mamta
I don't think he should be talking about the Commonwealth Games because he shouldn't be. Look, these are allegations, and mostly these allegations are through the media. And once the facts are before us and the investigation takes place, the law will take its course. The Prime Minister should not be involved in speaking on the Commonwealth Games whether something has been allegedly proved to be right or wrong.
So the perception that he's silent and he's opted out is unfair.
Totally unfair. I don't think he should talk about the Commonwealth Games at all. It's not his station to talk about the Commonwealth Games, whether these allegations are true or not.
So the perception that this government has lost direction is unfair.
Totally unfair.
All right, let's take a break. Let's come back and talk about areas where the government has won praise and ask, why then haven't you got the credit you think you deserve? That's in a moment's time. See you after the break. Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and an exclusive interview on the performance of the government with the Human Resource Development Minister, Kapil Sibal. Kapil Sibal, let's come to subjects where the government has won praise. And first and foremost, the economy. There's no doubt that you have overcome the threat to growth. But the problem is that you've ended up with high inflation, which you can't reduce. I mean, inflation is stubbornly stuck at 9%.
Right.
Food price inflation has jumped up to 11.4%.
That's now, yes.
Let me ask you bluntly, has inflation defeated the government?
No, I don't think so. I think the inflation is a phenomenon that is recognized. I think the finance minister and the government is extremely concerned about inflation. I think steps are being taken, and with a record output this year, I think that by the end of the year, inflation will go down to 5%.
Let me put it like this. I'll come to a moment to this claim that inflation will go down to 5% by the end of the year. But you say steps are being taken. The Supreme Court itself has pointed out that rotting grain should have been given free. If it had been, prices would have come down and the hungry would have been fed.
Highly exaggerated numbers, I'm sure.
Who's exaggerated?
The volumes of grain that
you mean the Supreme Court is exaggerating?
I'm not talking about Supreme Court. The numbers given in the public domain are highly exaggerated.
But it's the Supreme Court commenting that I'm quoting to you.
The Agriculture Minister said today in Parliament, in the Rajya Sabha, to a question, saying these numbers are highly exaggerated.
So the Supreme Court has commented on figures that are not accurate.
I'm not commenting on the Supreme Court. I'm only telling you what the Minister said with responsibility on the floor of the House.
So you don't, as a government committed to the Aam Aadmi, have a sense of guilt that the Supreme Court is saying, don't let grain rot, give it away instead?
We agree. We agree.
Then why didn't you act?
You are questioning the number. I'm only questioning the numbers. Of course we agree grain should not rot.
But it has rotted and it wasn't given.
I am not disputing that some portions have rotted, are rotting.
So who's responsible for this?
Government, of course.
So government carries the blame?
Of course it carries the blame. Why will government not carry that in some part of it is wrong? We must accept.
You're being very broad-minded. You're saying the government was wrong.
It's not a question of right or wrong. Remember, central government doesn't look at every go down and doesn't inspect every go down which is in the state, which is in various states. There are some responsibilities of the SPI, the officers of the FCI,
so government's in the plural.
Obviously, governments in the plural.
Are mistaken
right?
and
governments
wrong.
in the plural, if there is some part of the grain rotting, must take the blame. Why it is rotted will be looked into. But the fact of the matter is, let's not blow this out of proportion.
Let's not blow this out of proportion.
90% of it, much more than that, doesn't rot.
Let's not blow it out of proportion. Let's then come to the second thing. You said that by the end of this year, inflation will be down to 5%. Kaushik Basu has said it, Montek Singh Ahluwalia said it, Pranab Mukherjee said it. The problem is, just 6 months ago, all three were predicting that inflation would peak at 6% in March, and it didn't. I put it to you that on the issue of inflation, the government's credibility is damaged.
No, again, as you said, inflation is an issue. We accept that fact. But if you really look at the last several years, there is a global dimension to it. And that's something that the finance minister...
So you're a victim of something outside your control.
I'm a victim. Again, don't use these harsh words. I'm neither a victim. We are part of a global market.
All right.
Right? There are some factors in the global market that impact on inflation, of which we have very little control.
I will leave it there, but I will point out that others would disagree whether in fact it's the global market that impacts it or whether it's your policy.
Economics is not mathematics.
Let's
right?
then come.
If it's not a formula of algebra, others will disagree.
Let's come then to the second area where the government has achieved a lot, the Right to Education Act. Undoubtedly, it's a significant landmark. The problem is that people perceive that you're having trouble implementing it.
Always.
Are you?
There always will be. Because the process of implementation is highly complex. Again, you see, Karan must understand, government is not just the Prime Minister. Prime Minister provides leadership. Government is various stakeholders who have official responsibility to carry forward the policies of the government.
I understand
and
that.
Therefore, please don't look at government by one incident here or there.
No, but come back to the
Implementation of the Right to Education Act is the responsibility of who? Central government, state government, schools, parents.
Where's the problem?
Stakeholders.
Where's the problem?
Problem is that we need to make sure that at the level of every school, all that is laid down on the Act is implemented.
Are schools,
so you have to have
defying the Act? Are private schools in particular defying the Act?
One second. Schools have to be, neighborhood schools have to be set up by the state governments, and they have the authority to describe what a neighborhood school is and where it should be set up.
Are they doing it, or are they doing it
very slowly?
They
are doing it. They've got 3
painfully?
years under the Act itself. Now you want me, want 100% performance in a few months when the Act prescribes 3 years. And you are saying, look, there's a big problem of implementation. There is a problem, and that implementation will have to be done in 3 years' time. Well, we are not even 6 months old.
Can I ask you this? When do you think every child above the age of 6 will be in school as the Act requires?
I think every person will be literate in this country by 2020.
By 2020?
Every person.
What about my specific...
When I say literate means 98% literacy.
What about my specific question? When will every child over the age of 6 be in school?
I would say within 5 years.
Within 5 years?
Yes, yes.
So implementation will take 5 years?
3 years for the physical infrastructure, 5 years to get the teachers there, and in 5 years' time, every child will be in school.
My last question, if it's going to take 5 years, can you understand the impatience people feel?
No. When you say the numbers will be increasing, we're 64% literate today. There are 10 million children out of school. We have to get them into school. This is no easy job. And it's not the job of one minister or another. It's all the stakeholders within the system, and that applies to every other function.
So you're satisfied with the progress, even if people are impatient?
Absolutely.
Kapil Sibal, a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.